Remember the 2000s, when games weren't afraid to be weird, bright colours, bizarre ideas, and risks that somehow worked? One year you were rolling up planets in Katamari Damacy, the next you were exploring people's brains in Psychonauts, or painting the world back to life in Okami. That kind of fearless creativity has mostly disappeared from today's blockbusters. Budgets skyrocketed, risks vanished, and everything started looking the same. But here's the thing, it's not gone. It's alive and thriving in the indie scene. Indie developers are carrying the torch of that wild, creative 2000s energy, and in some cases, pushing it even further. If you love gaming history and indie deep dives, hit that like button early. It helps this video reach more people who still crave that golden age creativity. This is how indie games became the revival of gaming's weirdest, most creative decade. To understand why today's indie boom feels like a revival, we need to look back at what made the 2000s special. This was a decade defined by experimentation. The leap to 3D was still fresh, and developers were throwing ideas at the wall just to see what would stick. On the PS2, GameCube, Xbox, and Dreamcast, you could find everything from gritty shooters to cheerful, bizarre experiments. And at the heart of it were the AA studios, teams with enough budget to dream big, but not so much that they were paralysed by risk. Their games weren't designed by committee, they were quirky, personal, and often strange, but full of soul. That's how we got games like Katamari Damacy, a surreal fever dream about rolling up the world into a sticky ball. Okami, a stunning adventure that felt like a living brushstroke painting, and Psychonauts, a platformer about empathy, humour, and exploring people's inner worlds. It wasn't just oddball creativity though, the 2000s also redefined genres. Jet Set Radio fused cel shading, skate culture, and a groundbreaking soundtrack into a game that felt like a cultural statement. Even distribution was changing. Xbox Live Arcade and early Steam created space for smaller, riskier projects to reach audiences without massive retail launches. But as the decade ended, the industry changed. Development costs exploded, budgets hit Hollywood levels, and with that came corporate caution. Sequels dominated, photorealism became an obsession, and that creative mid-tier, the quirky, soulful AA studio, got squeezed out. Games started to feel safer, more polished, but also more corporate. What about you? What 2000s game felt magical to you at the time? Okami, Psychonauts, or maybe something niche like Beautiful Joe or Chibi Robo? Drop it in the comments, I'd love to see which forgotten gems shaped your gaming memories. But just as that creative flame was flickering in the mainstream, it reignited somewhere else. Indie developers weren't a coincidence, they were a response to the industry losing its nerve, and the timing was perfect. Engines like Unity and Unreal suddenly made professional-grade tools available to everyone, often for free. Digital storefronts like Steam, itch.io, and later the Switch eShop blew open distribution. And Kickstarter gave creators a way to pitch directly to players, bypassing traditional publishers entirely. This democratized development. A single person, or a small team, now had the power to make games at a scale that once required entire studios. And without shareholders breathing down their necks, they had freedom. They could experiment. They could revive forgotten genres, and they could tell deeply personal stories. In many ways, indies became the new AA studios. Not mid-sized teams with modest budgets, but passionate creators making games with the same mix of ambition and risk-taking that defined the 2000s. They weren't just building products, they were making games with soul. If you're nodding along thinking, this is why I love indies, consider subscribing. I cover indie games all the time, and you'll see more videos just like this one. Some indie games don't just feel like the 2000s, they're direct descendants. Take Bomb Rush Cyberfunk. For all intents and purposes, this is Jet Set Radio 3. The cel-shaded art, the funky soundtrack, the rebellious street culture, it's all there. But Team Reptile didn't stop at homage, they evolved it. Traversal is faster, combos are smoother, and the story actually has depth. Or Stardew Valley. For years, fans felt Harvest Moon had lost its charm. Then one developer, Concerned Ape, rebuilt it from scratch. Not only did Stardew recapture the warmth of the originals, it expanded the formula with combat, crafting, and heartfelt character arcs. It wasn't just a throwback, it was a rebirth. And then there's A Hat in Time. When 3D platformers disappeared from AAA lineups, this indie stepped up, reviving the whimsy of Super Mario Sunshine and Psychonauts in a way that felt both nostalgic and fresh. These games prove that if publishers won't continue the legacy of beloved 2000s classics, indie devs will. What about you? Which indie gave you that 2000s feeling again? Was it Stardew Valley, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, or something more obscure? Comment below, I always reply. But here's the key. Not every indie is a successor. Some capture the philosophy of the 2000s, risk-taking, quirkiness, and fearless experimentation. Take Dave the Diver. On paper, it sounds absurd. Deep sea exploration by day, sushi restaurant sim by night, with farming, RPG progression, stealth missions, and even a story about ancient sea people. A AAA pitch meeting would laugh this out of the room, but as a quirky, heartfelt indie, it works. It's chaotic, unpredictable, and dangerously fun, just like Katamari Damacy once was. Or Hollow Knight. It takes the Metroidvania genre and elevates it with the artistic ambition of Okami. Its hand-drawn world feels haunting and alive, its combat is tough but fair, and its storytelling is minimalist, letting players piece together the lore. That design philosophy, trusting players, rewarding curiosity, was everywhere in the 2000s, but has nearly vanished in AAA. And then there's Celeste. Where psychonauts use levels as metaphors for characters' psyches, Celeste turns gameplay itself into metaphor. Climbing the mountain is Madeline's struggle with anxiety and self-doubt. Every death, every retry isn't just challenge, it's storytelling. And its ultimate message of perseverance and self-acceptance, it's just as hard as its platforming. These games don't just copy the 2000s, they carry its DNA forward. If you're enjoying this breakdown, don't forget to hit like, it helps more people discover indie gems they might otherwise miss. So why do these indie games resonate so much? It's not just nostalgia, it's because they fill a void AAA can't. Blockbusters today are built for engagement metrics, live service loops, and microtransactions. They're polished, yes, but often soulless. Indies feel different. They feel handcrafted, and when you play one, you can feel the developer's fingerprints. The same way you could with quirky 2000s projects. They remind us that games can still be personal, surprising, emotional, and weird. That they can be more than just products. And they prove something the 2000s showed us, but AAA has forgotten. You don't need a $100 million budget to make something meaningful. You just need vision and heart. Have you found an indie that surprised you the way a 2000s game once did? Share it in the comments. You might help someone else discover their next favourite game. The gaming industry today is bigger than ever. Budgets are massive, visuals are cinematic, and franchises dominate. But in that race for scale, much of the industry lost a willingness to take risks. That's why indie games matter. They're not just a trend, they're the creative pulse of gaming today. They're carrying forward the legacy of the 2000s, the decade when games were bold, heartfelt, and unafraid to be strange. So if you're missing that spark of the early 2000s, don't just look back, look at what indie devs are making right now. The revival isn't in the past, it's happening today. And here's my last question. What forgotten 2000 genre do you hope indie devs revive next? Tell me below, I'll highlight some of your answers in a future video. If you enjoyed this one, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the follow-up. And if you want to support indie creators, both in gaming and right here on YouTube, a like and a share goes a long way.